My name is Riley Bennett. I am 17 years old. And the morning my mother got married in Hawaii, I was standing alone in our kitchen in Portland, holding a negative COVID test and staring at my phone while everyone else smiled for beachfront wedding pictures without me. By then, I already knew I had not been forgotten in the normal way people forget a charger or a suitcase. I knew I had been left out slowly, neatly, and quietly, like someone clearing a place setting off a table, and hoping nobody would ask why one chair stayed empty. For months, the wedding had been treated like the most beautiful thing our family had ever done. There were dress appointments, playlists, seating charts, florist updates, and endless Instagram stories about sunsets, white orchids, and the dream of finally making it official after all those years. My older siblings had their roles. My mother had her spotlight. My father had his easy smile and his habit of pretending everything was fine, as long as nobody said the ugly part out loud. And me, I had a part-time bookstore job, a camera full of moments nobody else noticed, and a growing feeling that every conversation about that wedding somehow curved around me on purpose. I told myself not to be dramatic. I told myself maybe travel details were coming later. Maybe somebody had already handled my ticket. Maybe I was imagining the distance, because I had spent so many years teaching myself how to need less. But the day before they flew to Hawaii, one simple question exposed everything. And by the time the ceremony began, my mother was telling people I had COVID while I was looking at proof that said otherwise. That was the moment I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. Before I tell you what I posted and why my phone started ringing minutes after the wedding began, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you listening from? I really want to know how far this story reaches. Once the trip was officially booked, the whole house started orbiting around my mother's wedding like it was the only thing that mattered. Her mood boards took over the kitchen island. Fabric swatches and florist notes sat where our cereal boxes used to go. Every night she had her phone propped up against a wine glass, while she posted little updates about centerpieces, sunset dinner plans, and how magical it felt to finally be planning the wedding she deserved. My sister Madison was suddenly at our house almost every day, helping with bridesmaid details, tasting cake samples, and going with mom to fittings and spa appointments. My brother Connor kept getting looped into conversations with dad about the tuxes, the rental car, and which dinner jacket looked best for a beachside reception. And me, I kept finding myself on the edges of every room, close enough to hear but never close enough to be included. At first, I told myself it was fine. I had school, senior year deadlines, and my weekend shifts at the bookstore. I had my camera, my journal, and a habit of pretending I did not care when I very clearly did. But the thing about being left out for years is that you become good at recognizing the shape of it. It is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like your mother saying she already took care of the travel details and would forward you your information later. Sometimes it looks like your sister coming home with garment bags and shopping bags while you stand there still not knowing what color you are even supposed to wear. Sometimes it is your father glancing up from his laptop and saying, "Riley, do not make this a thing," when all you did was ask what the schedule was. I tried more than once to offer something useful. I asked if mom wanted me to put together a printed wedding journal with candid photos and little handwritten notes from the guests, because that was actually something I would have been good at. I asked if she wanted me to photograph the rehearsal dinner or make a memory book for afterward. She did not even look up the first time. The second time, she smiled that thin smile she used when she wanted to sound kind while shutting a door in my face and said, "Sweetie, I already have everything handled. This one really does not need your touch." That sentence sat in my chest for days, not because it was cruel on its own, but because it fit too perfectly into every other moment I had ever tried to step forward and been quietly guided back into the shadows. As the departure date got closer, the details got louder for everyone except me. I heard them comparing boarding times over dinner. I heard them laugh about who would nap on the plane and who would be annoying during the layover. I watched my mother and sister spread dresses across the guest bed, then heard them lower their voices when I walked by. It was always just enough to make me doubt myself, just enough to make me wonder whether I was being excluded on purpose or whether I was so used to feeling invisible that I was seeing rejection where none existed. But then the family group chat started buzzing the day before the flight with messages about packing chargers, bringing formal shoes, and not forgetting passports. My mother asked if everyone was ready for the airport in the morning. Madison sent a mirror selfie with 3 dress bags. Connor joked about needing coffee before sunrise. Dad sent a thumbs up. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed the question that had apparently occurred to nobody else to ask. What time is my flight again? The chat went quiet so fast it felt like the whole house stopped breathing. I still remember the way my mother walked into the kitchen after I sent that message. She had her phone in one hand and this tight, irritated expression on her face, like I had interrupted something important, instead of asking a completely normal question the day before a family trip to Hawaii. She said, "What do you mean? What time is your flight?" I looked at her and said, I do not have a confirmation, a seat number, or anything with my name on it. So I was asking what time my flight is. For about 2 seconds, she just stared at me. Then her whole face changed. Not into guilt, not into concern, into panic. She started tapping through her email so fast I could hear her nails hitting the screen. She checked one app, then another, then looked up and said the words that finally made everything in my life click into place. "Oh my God, I do not think I booked yours." She said it like a woman realizing she forgot to order flowers, not like a mother admitting she had somehow made full travel plans for an intimate family wedding and left out her 17-year-old daughter. I asked if she was serious. She told me not to use that tone with her. I asked if I had a room in Hawaii. She froze again. Then I asked if there was even a seat for me at the rehearsal dinner, a spot for me in the rental car, anything at all with my name attached to it. The answer to every question was written all over her face before she said a single word. Madison came in halfway through and immediately looked annoyed with me, which was honestly impressive considering she had just learned her mother had forgotten to include me in a destination wedding. Connor showed up next, then Dad, and within minutes the whole thing turned into exactly what I should have expected. My mother said I should have reminded her. My sister said I had been acting distant for months, and maybe Mom assumed I did not want to go. My father said this was not the time to create drama the night before a big family event. I could barely process the insanity of what I was hearing. I asked why nobody had noticed I never got a dress fitting, why nobody had sent me a flight detail, why nobody had once asked if I was packed, and that was when the excuses got uglier, because they ran out of reasonable ones. Dad said I could just wear whatever I already owned because I was never into girly stuff anyway. Madison said I probably would have been miserable the whole time and brought the mood down. My mother snapped that if I had paid attention instead of keeping to myself all the time, maybe this would not have happened. That one almost made me laugh because it was so transparent. They had ignored me for years, and now they were trying to blame me for being ignorable. I asked the only question that mattered. So, was I ever really supposed to go? Nobody answered right away. Dad looked away first. Connor rubbed the back of his neck and stared at the floor. Madison crossed her arms. My mother's eyes hardened, and that was when I knew. If it had truly been an accident, she would have sounded horrified. She would have started fixing it. Instead, she looked cornered. Then she said, "If you are going to be this difficult, maybe it is better if you do not come at all." The room went quiet after that. I expected someone to jump in. I expected my father at the very least to say that was too far. He did not. He just sighed like he was exhausted by my reaction to their behavior. Something inside me went still. I said, "Okay, that was it. No yelling, no crying, just okay." The next morning, I listened from my bedroom as suitcase wheels rolled across hardwood floors and car doors slammed outside. Nobody knocked on my door before they left. Nobody came back for me. By noon, they were posting airport pictures. By evening, they were in Hawaii, smiling in ocean light like I had never existed. I might have stayed numb if they had left it at that. But the next day, one of my mother's friends sent me a message that said, "Sweetheart, I am so sorry you got sick right before the wedding. I hope you recover soon." I read it twice before the words fully sank in. Sick right before the wedding. I opened Instagram and saw exactly what she had done. People were asking where I was in the comments of her beachside photos, and she was telling them I had tested positive for COVID and had to stay home. She had not just forgotten me. She had erased me, then wrapped that erasure in a clean little lie so nobody would see what she had done. I put my phone down, walked to the bathroom cabinet, and pulled out the unopened COVID test box we still had from winter. That was the first moment I smiled. Oh, I did not rush. That was probably the part that surprised my mother most later. The fact that I did not react like a teenager in a movie. I did not start ranting online the second I saw her lie. I took the test, set a timer, and sat on the edge of the tub watching the little control line appear. Negative. Completely clearly negative. Then I took a picture with good lighting, because if I was going to tell the truth, I wanted it to be impossible to blur. After that, I went back through the family group chat and screenshotted the exact moment I asked what time my flight was, and my mother came undone. I checked my email and my airline app, then took screenshots showing I had no booking confirmation, no boarding pass, no itinerary, nothing at all under my name. I laid my phone on my desk and looked at all of it for a long time. I wish I could say I felt powerful right away, but the truth is I felt sick. Not with COVID, with grief, with humiliation, with the kind of anger that settles low and steady instead of exploding. I knew that once I posted, there would be no taking it back. My mother would never forgive the public embarrassment. My sister would call me cruel. My father would say I had gone too far. Maybe some people would even believe them. But I also knew this. If I stayed silent, then her version would become the official version. I would become the flake-eyed daughter who could not make it because she got sick. The absent kid, the vague little inconvenience. And after years of shrinking myself to fit inside that role, I could not do it one more time. So, I waited. I watched the time difference. I knew when the ceremony was supposed to start because my mother had talked about the schedule nonstop for weeks. 15 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle in Hawaii, I opened Instagram and made one post. It was a carousel. The first image was me holding the negative COVID test. The second was the group chat screenshot. The third was the empty airline booking page with my name nowhere on it. My caption said, "I did not miss the wedding because I was sick. I was never booked." Then, because I wanted it simple and impossible to twist, I added one more line. Not COVID, just forgotten and then lied about. I tagged the people who had commented asking where I was. I tagged a couple of my mother's closest friends who had spent months hyping up her perfect destination wedding. Then I put my phone down on my bed and waited. It took less than a minute. First came the likes, then the comments. Wait, what? Nicole told everyone you were positive. Riley, are you serious? How does someone forget their own daughter? Then came the private messages. Some were shocked, some were kind, some were clearly fishing for drama, but even those told me what I needed to know. The story was spreading. At the venue, people were seeing it in real time. I imagined the timing exactly as it must have happened. Guests in nice resort clothes, checking their phones before the ceremony. One bridesmaid showing another. Somebody turning to look at my mother with a different expression. Madison catching it next and rushing over in a panic. My mother trying to smile through it while her face drained of color. She had built that whole wedding around the image of perfection. And in less than 5 minutes, the image cracked. My phone started vibrating nonstop across the comforter. My sister called first. I let it ring out, then my father. I did not answer that either. Then my mother called, and for a second I just stared at her name on the screen while the room around me felt impossibly quiet. I picked up on the fourth ring. She was whisper, yelling so hard I could hear the strain in her throat. Riley, what the hell did you do? I stayed calm. I corrected your story. She hissed that guests were asking questions, that this was her wedding day, that I had no idea how humiliating this was. That was almost enough to make me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because humiliation was apparently only real when it happened to her. I asked, did you think it was not humiliating to tell people I had COVID? Because it sounded better than admitting you forgot your own daughter. She told me to delete the post immediately. She said we would talk when she got home. She said I was selfish, vindictive, and determined to ruin the most important day of her life. And that was the moment something in me turned cold in a way that felt strangely clean. I said, you lied first. I only told the truth. Then I hung up. For the rest of the day, I watched the fallout like weather moving in from far away. She deleted a story. Madison made hers private. Dad posted nothing. A few guests unfollowed me after looking at my page, but far more of them sent quiet messages saying they were sorry. One of my mother's oldest friends wrote, I do not even know what to say. I am so sorry, honey. That one made me cry, not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first time in days someone had acted like what happened to me mattered more than the event I had disrupted. By the time the ceremony ended, I knew one thing for certain. My mother had gotten her Hawaii wedding. She just had not gotten to control the story of it anymore. When they got back to Portland a week later, the house felt like it had been filled with static. Nobody greeted me. Nobody asked how I was. My mother came through the front door looking 10 years older and twice as angry, but she still had that polished look she always wore in public, as if part of her believed she could outdress humiliation. My father dragged in suitcases without meeting my eyes. Madison stormed straight upstairs and slammed a door. Connor hovered in the hallway like he wanted to say something, but had not figured out whether he was brave enough to deal with the consequences. The confrontation happened that night in the kitchen, which somehow felt fitting since that was where the truth had first come apart. My mother said I had humiliated her in front of everyone she cared about. I told her she had done that to herself. She said none of this would have happened if I had come to her privately. I reminded her I had come to her privately the day before the flight, and she told me maybe I should not come at all. My father jumped in then, not to defend me, but to complain about the timing. He said there had to have been a better way than posting during the ceremony. He kept circling back to that, like the real wound in the family was my post, and not the months of exclusion that came before it. Madison said I loved playing the victim, and that I was always looking for ways to make things about me. That one hit harder than I expected, because it was such a perfect inversion of reality. Their entire family system depended on me accepting scraps quietly, then being labeled dramatic the moment I noticed the table was empty. I did not yell. I did not insult anyone. I just kept answering plainly until my mother realized she was not going to pull me into a screaming match she could later use against me. That was when she switched strategies. The next morning, there was a designer shopping bag outside my bedroom door with a bracelet inside and a note that said, "Let us move forward." Later that day, she asked if I wanted to go to lunch, just the two of us. The day after that, she mentioned maybe they could do something special for my 18th birthday, maybe get me a car earlier than planned, maybe help me redo my room, maybe. It was not remorse, it was damage control. She was trying to buy silence the way some people buy flowers after a public fight. When I did not respond, she got mean again. She said I was enjoying punishing her. She said I had become cold and disrespectful. She said I was making it impossible for the family to heal. The word heal almost made me dizzy. Nothing in this house had ever healed. Everything had just been covered over and carried on top of. That was the week I started sleeping with my important documents hidden under my mattress and my backpack half packed in the closet. I did not tell anyone what I was planning, because for the first time in my life, I understood that secrecy could belong to me too. Not the ugly secrecy of lies, but the protective kind. The kind that buys you time to leave before someone convinces you that staying is love. I called my grandmother, Dorothy, late one night after everyone went to bed. She lived outside Seattle and had always been the only adult in my family who looked at me long enough to notice when something was wrong. I told her everything, not just the ticket and the lie, but the years before it, the small exclusions, the way Madison and Mom moved like a pair while I learned to make myself useful alone, the way Dad always chose peace over truth. Even when that peace cost me my place in the room, I expected her to be sad. I did not expect the quiet fury in her voice. She said, "Riley, a child is not forgotten this many times by accident." Then she asked me if I felt safe staying there. I said, yes, technically, but that I could not keep living in that house if I wanted to stay sane. By the end of the call, she had made more decisions than my parents had made about me in months. She was coming to Portland with my Uncle Robert. She wanted me to stay with my friend Jasmine's family for a while, instead of trying to move straight into some unsafe apartment at 17. She wanted me to start thinking seriously about community college, work, and what it would mean to build a life that did not depend on the moods of people who only loved me when I was convenient. For the first time since Hawaii, I felt something warmer than anger. Not hope exactly, more like relief. Like maybe I had not been crazy all these years. Maybe the emptiness I felt inside that family had always been real. My brother knocked on my bedroom door 2 nights later. He stood there looking uncomfortable and younger than 20. He said he had assumed I chose not to go because I never seemed interested in family stuff anyway. I asked him if he had ever noticed that maybe I stopped acting interested, because nobody wanted me there. He looked like he had never considered that once in his life. He apologized, and I believe that he meant it. But I also knew apology was not the same as understanding. My sister never apologized at all. She doubled down, telling relatives and family friends that I had twisted a misunderstanding into a public spectacle because I was jealous of Mom and always needed attention. That made it easier. Honestly, her cruelty clarified things. By the time my grandmother texted that her flight had landed, I already knew I was done asking this family to see me. I picked my grandmother and Uncle Robert up from the airport on a gray Monday morning that smelled like rain and jet fuel. And the second I saw her walking through arrivals with one hand on her rolling suitcase and the other hooked through my uncle's arm, I burst into tears so hard I had to stop in the middle of the terminal. She held me for a long time without saying a word, which was exactly what I needed. Some people rush to fill pain with advice. My grandmother had always known better. She let me cry until I could breathe again. Then she pulled back, looked me right in the face, and said, "We are going to fix what we can and name what we cannot." That sentence stayed with me. It still does. We went to their hotel first. I told them everything all over again, slower this time. From the years of being the afterthought to the fight in the kitchen, after the trip to the gifts, my mother suddenly wanted to throw at me, now that her image had cracked. Uncle Robert, who worked as a financial advisor and had the driest voice on earth, was the one who said it most clearly. No ticket, no room, no itinerary, no role, no dress fitting. That is not forgetting. That is exclusion with a better publicist. Hearing someone say it that plainly felt like air after weeks underwater. Later that afternoon, we drove to my house. My parents were both home because my grandmother had not given them warning. When we walked in, my mother looked genuinely shocked for the first time since Hawaii. Not upset, not offended, shocked. Probably because public opinion was one thing. Her own mother standing in her living room was another. Dad tried to start with pleasantries, but Grandma cut him off. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She asked my mother to explain how a woman could plan every floral arrangement, every dinner reservation, every seat assignment for a 15-person wedding, and somehow forget her youngest child. My mother started crying almost immediately, which would have moved me once. It did not now. She said she had been overwhelmed. She said social media had made everything look worse than it was. She said she never meant for Riley to feel unwanted, as if unwanted were some unfortunate misunderstanding instead of the exact experience she had created. Grandma asked why she lied about COVID. Then my mother had no good answer for that one. Dad stepped in and said they had panicked because guests were asking questions and they did not want family drama overshadowing the event. Uncle Robert said, "So you chose a lie that made your daughter carry the embarrassment instead." Dad had no answer either. While they were talking, Grandma told me to go upstairs and pack the things that mattered most. Not everything, just what I needed to leave that day. I took 2 suitcases, my backpack, my camera, my journals, my laptop, my school files, my documents, and the little box where I kept my pay stubs and cash from the bookstore. My hands shook while I packed, but not because I was unsure, because I knew every zipper I closed was a door shutting behind me. When I came back downstairs with my suitcases, the atmosphere in the living room had changed. My father looked red and cornered. My mother looked blotchy and ruined, in a way that had nothing to do with makeup. My grandmother was sitting straight backed in the armchair, like a judge who had already heard enough. My mother stood up the second she saw my bags. "Riley, please do not do this. We can fix this. We were going to do something special for your birthday. We can start over." She said it like a woman trying to salvage a brand campaign. I almost pitied her for how transparently she still did not understand. Start over was not a thing you got to say after years of teaching your child she was extra weight in the family photo. She came toward me with her arms open, and I stepped back before she could touch me. "Save it," I said. My father told me not to be rude, and for once my uncle snapped before I had to. He told Dad that decency was a little late in the day for lectures about tone. My grandmother had already arranged for me to stay with Jasmine's family until we could figure out the next step. Jasmine and her parents had offered without hesitation, which nearly broke my heart in the gentlest way, because that was what care was supposed to look like. Not grand performances, not apology jewelry, just a safe room and people who meant what they said. My mother tried one last angle before I left. She said she had already drafted a post explaining everything and apologizing publicly, hoping maybe that would show me how serious she was. Grandma shut that down immediately. "This is not a public relations problem, Nicole. This is a motherhood problem." I will never forget the look on my mother's face when she heard that. It was the first time all day someone had named the real failure. I rolled my suitcases out to the driveway myself. Nobody stopped me. Connor stood in the doorway like he wanted to help, but did not know if he had earned the right. Madison stayed upstairs, which honestly felt consistent with everything else. As my uncle loaded my bags into the trunk, I looked back once at the house I had spent years trying to belong in. The windows were bright, the lawn was cut. From the outside, it still looked like the kind of place people envy. Then I got in the car and left anyway. That was the quiet move. Not revenge for revenge's sake. Survival without begging. Living at Jasmine's house for those first few weeks felt strangely unreal. Not because it was luxurious. It was not. Her family's house was smaller than ours and noisier and nowhere near as polished, but people there said good morning and meant it. Her mom asked if I had eaten. Her dad left the porch light on when he knew I would be home late from a bookstore shift. Jasmine knocked before entering my room. Nobody in that house made love feel like a prize I had to earn by becoming more convenient. My grandmother helped me map out the practical side of my life, the way my parents should have years ago. We looked at community college options near Portland, so I would not have to blow up my future just to get out. We talked about transferring later if I wanted. I added shifts at the bookstore. I opened my own bank account. I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in neglected teens, and for the first few sessions, I barely knew how to speak without minimizing everything. I kept saying things like, "It was not that bad," or "They never hit me." Or I think maybe I am just too sensitive. My therapist would wait for me to finish, then ask one question that stripped all the padding away. If a friend told you this happened to her, would you call it minor? I never had a good answer for that. While I was rebuilding my actual life, my mother's fake one kept collapsing in slow motion. She tried posting a carefully worded apology on Instagram that somehow mentioned stress, miscommunication, and the emotional pressure of planning a wedding far more than it mentioned me. It landed exactly as badly as it deserved. People did not respond the way they used to. Some of her closest social circle friends went quiet. A few unfollowed her outright. She had been on the planning committee for a charity luncheon in our area. And according to one of Madison's angry texts, several women had suggested she step back for a while because the event was centered on community values and family wellness. That irony almost wrote itself. Her interior design referrals slowed down too, not in one dramatic crash, but in the way trust leaks out of a person's reputation once people see the gap between the image and the truth. Nobody likes discovering that the woman selling perfect homes cannot even explain what she did to her own child. My father kept trying to reach me in these careful, measured messages that still managed to avoid the center of the wound. He was sorry for how things had unfolded. He regretted that the wedding situation had escalated. He hoped one day we could talk as a family. I noticed he almost never wrote the word sorry next to an actual action he had taken. He had spent my entire life choosing the path of least conflict, and that had always meant choosing my mother. He was not harmless just because he was quieter. Madison remained furious and impossible. She said Mom was humiliated, that I had cost her friendships, that people were talking, that I had punished the whole family over one mistake. One mistake. That phrase told me more than anything else could have. To them, the wound began the moment I became visible. Everything before that was just normal. Connor was the only one who seemed to be doing any real self-reflection. He wrote me a long message admitting he had spent years assuming I just preferred to be alone because that version required less from him. He said he was starting to see how often silence had benefited him because it let him enjoy the family without questioning the price someone else was paying for it. I did not forgive him right away, but I respected that he was at least trying to tell the truth without centering his discomfort. The day that changed something inside me for good happened about 6 weeks after I moved out. My therapist had encouraged me to start taking pictures again, not for school or for social media, just for myself. One afternoon after work, the light over the city turned gold in that early fall way Oregon does so well, and I pulled over near a trail overlook with my camera. I took a picture of the sky over the neighborhoods below. All those neat roofs and pretty streets and houses, full of stories nobody could see from the outside. When I got home and uploaded the photos, one of them stopped me. It was beautiful, but not in a polished, staged way. It looked honest, quiet, a little lonely, but wide open. I realized then that my whole life I had been trained to think being overlooked meant being small. But being is not the same as being without value. Sometimes it just means the people around you have poor vision. That became the lesson I carried forward. Family can wound you in ways strangers never could, because family gets close enough to shape the mirror you look into. If the wrong people hold that mirror long enough, you start believing you are hard to love when really you have just been surrounded by people who only recognize versions of love that flatter them. I learned that emotional neglect is real harm even when nobody leaves bruises. I learned that keeping the peace is not the same as being kind. I learned that silence can be weakness when it is forced on you, but it can also become strength when you choose it long enough to plan your next step clearly. Most of all, I learned that protecting your own worth is not cruelty, even when the people who hurt you call it that. My mother lost the image she cared about more than the truth. She lost friends, influence, and the easy admiration she had built her life around. But the deeper consequence was this. She lost access to me as an audience member in her performance of motherhood. I was done clapping on cue. I was done making myself smaller so the family story could stay pretty. I still do not know what our relationship will look like years from now. Maybe limited, maybe distant forever, maybe polite, and nothing more. But I know this with a certainty I never had before from Hawaii. I do not need the people who forgot me to tell me I matter. I matter because I am here, because I kept going, because I told the truth, because I chose a future over a role. And if anyone listening to this has ever felt invisible in their own home, I want you to hear me clearly. Being overlooked does not mean you are unworthy. Being excluded does not mean you deserved it. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop begging for a seat at a table where people keep pretending they forgot your name. Find the people who notice your silence, who ask if you are okay and wait for the real answer, who make room for you without acting like it is a favor. That is where healing starts. That is where your real life begins.